Hello everyone, it's Segoy Penguin Gaming, back with another edition of Office Hours with my good pal Andrew.
Hello.
And today we're going to do another code review. This one's going to be formatted a little bit differently. We're still going to kind of look at code and talk about similar things, what's changed, why we changed it, and what could be done better, or why it was done in specific ways, all sorts of those kind of thoughts. But this format is going to be, I've actually gone ahead and made changes, and I've created a pull request that has just my changes related to this task in it, which is much more applicable to like a day-to-day work life, and something that I'm trying to remember to emulate a little better in my private projects. It's far too easy to just, especially when you work by yourself, to have one branch and you just never make separate branches or anything like that. And you're like, oh yes, I developed everything on the main branch. It's all good. Perfect. And you don't have great places to fall back on. So here I am trying to be a better developer for the sake of you guys. And so Andrew's proud of me.
I am. I have my own little project going, and it's a couple months in the making, and I pushed to main for the first time 2 months, like a month ago. Yeah, not super proud of that, but it's really easy to do when you're the only person working on it.
Yeah, and so that's what we're going to do today. Before we continue, though, I will want to highlight a couple of new ideas for future videos that I would like to do that a couple people kind of commented it on. One was a discussion on how do you architect or arrange your folders and just organize a project, because especially when you're first starting off, you don't think about those things, and your tiny little project can be the Wild West, but when it gets bigger, you start running into problems. I've definitely experienced that, so I think that could be a topic worth exploring. I do think there's a whole video here that we can do about project managing yourself.
I did want to bring something else up. Your JSON files and your JSON schema.
Yes, I think we could have a discussion on configurable design. But yeah, if you guys have any other ideas, feel free to chime in at the comments below, and I'm completely open to what you guys think would be interesting. So let's get into this one. So I'm going to start off with a quick overview of what process I'm working on, and then kind of show the problems with the original setup for why we're doing it, and then we'll kind of walk through it the way Andrew would review my changes if I was a developer on his team at work. So you can see on my pull request here in GitHub, we're refactoring the step processing code. So if you're unfamiliar with the term refactoring,
it means whatever you want at the time.
I realize there's not really a good singular term. It's a great blanket term for I changed code, I don't know why. No, it can. It's how it sounds like sometimes, but in this case, I was running into more and more issues with how I originally set up the step processing. So rather than letting technical debt accumulate and become this giant ball that makes you feel like you're Sisyphus and you're never getting anywhere, you're just pushing it barely up the hill to keep it from crushing you, I'm getting ahead of it and saying, no, this is just creating more work than it's worth. So I took a day and a half and refactored it.
I think the term refactor gets abused a lot, but I think that's the crux of when it's appropriate to use the term refactor, is when you have a solution and you could add technical debt by doing it this way, but instead you're going to reduce it. I guess maybe you should describe technical debt.
Well, let me just show you. So maybe we'll answer it through here, and if you feel I did not answer it, we can talk a little bit more. So what was happening with my previous step processing? So first I'm going to define the term step. What do I mean by that? So I created what I call the step so that in my config files that define how the dialogue of the game works, I was able to abstractly describe actions to be taken that impact the game state based on the choices you made. For example, if I take a look at my public class step, I have only a few things that really tell or give it directions. It's a step type, so am I reassigning meeples? Am I changing a stat in the background? Am I setting a key value, assigning new, yada yada yada. There's a bunch of different generic actions I could be taking based on your choices. And then a couple of overrides that I might get into later if they're relevant. But then for each different step type, I just have a simple struct that holds the instructions of how to execute that step. So let's say we're reassigning meeples. All you have to tell me are which job are you taking meeples from, where are they going to, how many, and if they should have an opinion on that reassignment. Like, oh, I'm so excited to be a farmer now, or the whole reason this exists is so that I have a very configurable method to impact these systems without having to have my dialogue and code, or my dialogue files have direct calls to functions. All they have to do is just store instructions, and I have one piece of code that knows how to process that. Or at least that was the goal. You with me so far?
Yes! I'm the audience.
Oh, okay. I thought you were just very unsure. So, what was I originally doing? Was in my main class that like handles the scene or the scenario that's playing out. I originally had this big chunk where it would process the steps, and I had a beautifully large switch case where
It's always the switches.
It's always the switches. And I know I went on a big rant last time about commented out code, but this code is commented out so I can easily talk about it in the video. It'll be obliterated post video. But basically, I would just handle every single type of step and call the appropriate class or code or functions based on what we were trying to accomplish. So if you were adding a thought for a meeple to have, I would call the turn manager to queue up a meeple thought, because meeple thoughts are something that is processed on next turn. Or for weather, I would call the weather manager script to queue the weather. This is where the main problem was, and where the technical debt was coming in, is you'll notice for each one of these, so I had a variable here called the step display manager script, and all it was a reference to the step display manager. So that's fine. That's not hard to plug in, but that's a dependency that now the scenario manager has. And if something's broken with the step display manager, it's harder to unplug it while I'm trying to fix it, or maybe I need to ignore it for a while, and I'm like, I'll get to that next week. I need to finish this task now. Well, because there's a dependency, I have to do extra steps to continue working, or I have to completely switch what I'm working on to fix it. And in general, you want fewer dependencies. It also meant I had more things to do every time I made a new scene, because when I made a new scene, I would have a scenario manager, and the first thing I'd have to do is the scenario manager needs to know these 7 other scripts. So I'd have to drag the references in. And if you missed one, you might not find out until you're debugging later, maybe, 3 weeks after you made the scene, and you're like, holy cow, this has been broken the whole time. And so that's a risk I don't want to take when it comes time to ship a final product. What if I missed a reference? So it's lower risk to have fewer dependencies as well. But every new step type I was adding, the technical debt here was it was just becoming more and more awkward to keep adding script references or different methodologies of handling things. And I was just kind of tired of it. I was tired of having missing references. I was tired of following different design patterns. So that's why I sat down and said, we're going to refactor this to have a singular design pattern. Anything on technical that you want to add, or did I use a bazillion words like a proper Midwesterner to answer a question?
Yeah. No, I think you covered it. with an added bonus discussion about dependencies and loosely coupling things.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope in Unity, especially because I feel it's so easy to just drag and drop those references in. Like if I'm looking at my scene right here, I have my scenario manager, and I still have some references. Don't get me wrong. Those are there mainly because of the save and loading processing, which is something that might need to get revisited anyways in the future. But like it is so easy. You just get a nice little spot here. You just have to like, oh man, I need the house manager script. Just drag it and drop it. Like it's that easy. But if once you get a sizable project, it gets to be a lot of dragging and dropping. It's very easy to either miss one or put something in the wrong place, and then you get all sorts of goofiness. So
that's an interesting call out too. If you're not used to looking at Unity code, or if you're only used to looking at Unity code and not other things, you'll notice at the top of his files there's not a lot of imports.
You're talking
from
up
his
here?
own. Yeah, using. In Java terms, that would be an import, but
Gotcha.
yeah, you'll see he doesn't really import anything that's his stuff, and that's because he can drag and drop it in the UI like that.
And there's other strategies too that we won't go super into, but like you can have a static class, which is something that you can just reference anywhere. So like my calculation engine that determines if something's, eligible to happen or not. I made that a static class, so I don't need references anywhere. I just call it and all of its functions. But you got to be careful with static because it has a whole nother set of implications. Like it continues existing until the game is turned off. So if you switch scenes, now you got to consider that. So there's pros and cons to every strategy. Okay, so that's the premise of why we're refactoring this process. So now let's approach this a little more typically. We already kind of did a little bit of the work, so I'm going to pull up my pull request here. Anatomy of a good pull request. I don't know if this is where I wanted the video to go, but we're here now. So, Andrew, what do you look for? Because in my career, I didn't use Git pull requests. We had a custom built solution. So what are you looking for, I guess?
So this chunk here is great. You've got a summary that outlines what you did. If you were in a working environment, I would be looking to see links to the Jira ticket or, whatever management software you're using for your ticketing and your jobs. Could be most likely Jira, but it could also be Azure or whatever.
And full disclosure, I am fairly confident Step Refactoring did not have a ticket at all. It was just something that came upon me, and I was like, I'm going to get this done.
If I were code reviewing this at work, I would be like, hey, the ticket number is not on this. What ticket is this out of? And Addison would say, oh, I don't have a ticket. And I would be like, rejected. What is this?
Gone. Yeah, you, especially professionally, but also, and maybe that was the topic I was trying to think of earlier, was scope management and project managing yourself. Yeah, especially professionally, you do not make changes to the code base without a reason. And if you are, that's loosey-goosey startup bullshit, basically. So, which, hey, that's me, but...
And one reason for that would be working with people who do different things on your team. We were talking about like admin type people having different responsibilities, but specifically with this, there might be people who are non-technical entirely, like your business analysts and stuff like that. If you're pushing code and this is GitHub, so it lives totally within the wheelhouse of technical people. If you're pushing a change and Joe Schmo, who does business analyst, he's never going to see this. So that's definitely a red flag of like, then the next time he's doing something and he's like, well, if I do X thing, it triggers this thing, and Addison modified that thing, but there's no way for him to know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole question of did this get tested is a lot tougher too if you're going outside of your task management accountability, which I feel maybe is a little less pertinent because for solo projects, but it's still kind of relevant because even me, like, I'll look back at something I did 2-3 months ago and be like, why was that important? And sometimes being able to look at my Jira board and see, oh yeah, I completed these things around then, it kind of jogs that memory.
Yeah, other than that, I like to start there.
So on a pull request, there's a couple different ways you can look at it. I'll briefly pull up this file changed view. You can see in detail all the new and removed and updated lines. And this is a little bit of maybe a personal pet peeve, because like when I was reviewing changes with Fast, the less just noise, especially if you're trying to keep, to change a very specific thing and keep those changes well documented and bundled, the less noise you have, the better. So like changing a variable name when you don't have to, it's like fine technically, but if it updates like 17 files that are unrelated, it can definitely slow down the process. Looking at the file changes for me, I'm like, oh, how is the Meeple mover affected by this? Oh, great, I removed a comment. There was no reason. That comment's not even related to the stuff that I was working on, but now it shows up in this changelog. It's definitely something that can like bloat your history if you're the type of person that wants to look back at this history and be like, wait, when was this? This file's not working anymore. When did it stop working? This would just be another piece of noise.
I feel like this would be a good. Stop me if you don't want to get onto this little short rant, but this would be a good spot to interject about code formatters.
I'm not even sure where this is going, so let's go there.
So there's a lot of different code formatters. One of them is called Prettier, but there's a ton of them.
Okay, I know where we're going now.
Yeah. Code formatters do, and a lot of like industry level projects will make those mandatory practice, and it's like you do your changes and then you run your code formatter. I hate them for the reason that Addison just described. If I come into a file and I change 3 things, maybe there's a label somewhere and it's just like, oh, we wanted to reword that thing, that a label that actually displays to the user. We're gonna change that wording, and then I run the formatter, and it changes 100 lines in the file. And all it's doing is doing like, these curly brackets should be on a new line. There should be a space between the start of this opening parenthesis and the thing you put inside of it. That's all it's doing. But really hard to look at.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if there's any examples here, but it looks like I didn't really have that happen.
What I think's interesting is if you go up to that file you were just looking at, the one that you clearly didn't write, it's like generated, because this is the property files, right?
Oh yeah. The scenario, the Unity, the .unity file for the scene.
These are things that are tough to review because most of the time you have to learn to ignore them.
Yeah, especially for like Unity in specific, having some of those objects that are updated in the background as you're working with them through the editor. Really hard. I don't even know what I changed here, like, because it's the file and GUI ID, so it's like what reference is being made, but a lot of the times it's not even a change. It's maybe just when Unity is saving the scene, it might be renaming a file. If you are working with Git and you're working with Unity, one thing that I've run into that I will definitely recommend is be careful if you have multiple branches working on the same prefab or scenes. Because when it comes time to merge those branches, it can get really difficult for Git to properly do it. For a lot of those reasons of like the .unity file has changed in a lot of the ways that you don't foresee. So that's unfortunately a pretty big drawback of the prefab system and stuff within Unity, but just something to be careful of like, you know, if I'm going to have multiple branches, trying to have them working on distinct parts without a lot of overlap. I kind of regret having one prefab that I call Scenario Essentials that every scene uses as like its starter pack. What I should have done is there's like scene templates for that same purpose of like when you first create a scene, grab all of these things as like the starter template for the scene. Because this Scenario Essentials prefab has been an issue on a couple of my merge requests. So
very interesting.
Your rant turned into one of my rants, and now we've completely lost the thread. But
we're good. I think we covered the part that I was going to say, and it led into that, which is an interesting tidbit that I didn't know. So thanks.
And because this will be buried in the middle of a double rant, I'll make a short out of my point and not out of yours.
Glad to know my time's appreciated.
Let's actually look at some of the specific guts of these changes. So, I guess I don't know how you typically run code reviews when you have a full pull request at work. I always made the developer that submitted it kind of walk me through the major changes, and then we can kind of skim the other files for like, oh wait, what the heck is this? This doesn't make sense with what you just told me.
Let's say this. I should do that. So let's do that.
Oh, I forgot the green screen and the webcam. I won't be able to show my beautiful whiteboard drawing that I did when I was pre-planning this process. But
oh no.
Oh gosh, my hands are even disappearing with the green screen. Oh no. Either way, so I'll use it in front of my face. The main goal, if I was truly trying to be like the diet version of Thor, I would have had my Microsoft Paint open so I could hand draw a bullshit diagram. The main goal is, rather than having the scenario manager be that one-stop place where all of the step processing will land and then get redirected out to, I wanted to take that and make it its own class. So a nice little central scenario manager, or not scenario manager, step processing manager. On one side would be all of the ways a step could be introduced that needs to be processed. So the bulk of those are going to be from my matter config files. The ones that define the dialogue and the choices that you have. But there will be some side cases that I want to be able to do the same type of processing. So, like mid-cinematic, I might want to have at the very end of the cinematic that I play, meeples be reassigned to match what you just watched play out. So there's going to be, on one side, multiple ways to create a step. They'll all zipper into the single step processing manager, and then it will kind of direct traffic and allow things to be a one-to-many situation again, where based on the type, you're going to be processed by the proper code. So on all ends, it'll hopefully be more like the code that's running the logic is specialized or specific to what logic needs to be run. Did a lot of just hand-waving explaining, so let's actually show how that looks like in code. So one thing I will say is with comments for classes or functions, I try not to have the comment say what the class does or doesn't do. I try to talk about what its goal is. What was the original design intent? Mainly because if you have comments that say what a class does, and then 3 or 4 changes later, that could be completely inaccurate. But if you never update the comments, it could be actually harmful or misleading and lie to you. Comments can lie, code can't.
Not to
So,
put you on the spot, but can you give an example of that? The difference there?
so many times at work it happened. We would have, like, at work, we would have, like, financial classes that you would have a comment that would say, this processes the 2015 sales tax write-off for blah, blah, blah. And it would give the numbers for what that write-off would be. And then, so me hunting for why a number is being calculated wrong would read the comment and be like, oh, nope, okay, so this isn't the year that I'm looking for. I'm having issues with 2016. And then maybe an hour or two later, I'd find out, well, no, actually that class was reused for 2016. So the comment actually, made me waste time because it was too overly specific. A better version that would have been that this handles sales tax, blah, 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 write-off or whatever. It works with reference table, reference name here to determine what years and numbers and are, this is if it gives me information about how the whole process is designed so that I can research properly. That's why here I kind of talk about the design pattern I want to follow, but not all, and only really a couple of actual function names, because they like directly working together, that kind of thing.
I would add on to that and say if you're sticking to a format for your comments, especially like your header comments on top of a file or top of a method, make sure that format's useful, because there is a ton of stuff that you could say, and the more you say, the less useful it is. Like, for example, at work, our comment headers always say the percent of unit test coverage that this file has. So if our unit test covers 77% of that file, we put that in there. Totally useless information. It's wrong basically the instant you hit save.
So the step processing manager, that kind of middle spot that I was describing, there's only going to be two things that really matter. Is it's going to provide a public static void that anybody can call whenever they have a list of steps that need to be processed. And what it will do is it'll go through, and the first thing is a little bit of a special processing thing that I haven't really made use of yet, but I can tell in a couple places in the future I'm going to need to have this functionality, so I added it in. Basically, if that list absolutely needs to run the steps in a specific order. So if there's an explicit processing order, go ahead and order it. Someday I will learn what this operator is.
I can't remember what it's called.
It's called a lambda expression, but like when I need it and when I don't need it, hell if I know. We're learning over here.
It's a very, very common one to use in JavaScript. And
I haven't used JavaScript, so that explains that.
Yeah.
But yeah, assuming we're in the right order, then I just go through, and there's only two options for the step processing that actually could be a little bit different. It's just simply the difference between a step that I can completely process in the background and not display anything for player feedback, and ones where I do display something for player feedback. So that's what this the difference between queuing a display step versus just processing the step is. So what I mean by a display step is, and I can actually just show this real quick. This is a display step. It's a reassignment. I could totally do that on the back end, but because it is impacting the numbers that are visually visible to you, and it's just a good, in my opinion, this is the feedback loop I want you to see, is like, oh, some of my decisions do have immediate impacts. But I queue them up because there might be multiple, and if there's multiple, I don't want to fire the second one until the player has closed the first one. But that's the main difference in the approach too, is I'm not running a switch statement anymore to say, for this step, who should I call? I just throw up in the delegate call. The goal is then every class that is running code specifically for steps is subscribed to this delegate, and we'll check, is this step got instructions does this step have instructions for me? And if so, I'll execute the instructions. So I'll pull up the weather manager as an example. So looking at the top here, we'll see that same process step delegate. I'm subscribing the process step weather to, and this function, just right off the bat, we'll check, hey, is it the type that I know how to process? And if not, then this will do nothing. It just basically waves and says, nope, I'm good. But if it is, then we'll go ahead and we'll actually run the code related to weather processing. By doing the delegate subscriptions, now I have a lot fewer like hard dependencies. If the weather script doesn't exist because I've turned it off or I've disconnected that subsystem, nothing else is going to break because there's no hard connection there anymore.
It's probably a good time to call back to that phrase, loosely coupling things. If you were referencing these things directly, like that would be tightly coupled. So it's like, this thing cannot exist without this thing. If you're doing this through an event or a delegate, which I don't really know that the difference is between a delegate and an event. I know C# has both.
There's minor differences and they are important, and I never remember what they are. I have a lovely link that I go to every time I get concerned.
if you're not hip to what a delegate is in C#, it's just an event. And it's basically a fire and forget thing, saying you're shooting up a flare and saying, I did this thing, everybody that needs to know this, I did this thing, and it's not tightly coupled. So like, if this script were not working, the other script doesn't care.
Yeah, so that's the main middle ground piece. I'll show you an example from each end now. And that's kind of the crux of the changes. So what is it? What do the changes look like for the things that have steps that need processing? The main one will be the matters. If you want to see like what this looks like in the pull request, it has red means this is no longer there. Green is a new line. So you'll see here, there's only a couple of changes that I actually had to make. I still throw up an event or a delegate. See, even I say events when actually all they are delegates for me. I still throw up a delegate to say, you've confirmed an option, I am closing the menu. The player made a choice. There's still some places that will process that delegate to know, like I need to close the menu. I need to make the HUD interactable again. Stuff like that. So still need that delegate. That's not gone away entirely. But what is a little bit different is rather than having the step processing look at this delegate, it just calls the step processing manager process step list. So that's why, that static function. And I only do it if the steps are greater than 0. No need to call it if I've got nothing to process. One nice thing about that is anytime I was doing things that, was doing some step processing, but some other processing as well, I had this list of steps in the parameter of that delegate, and only some things subscribing to it cared about the steps at all. But a lot of things were like, I don't need this, but I need it in my signature to match the event. And so I was able to take that delegate and strip out the steps, because it's just, I'm not passing them around that way anymore. And that's really the main change of how these get queued up. However, one thing I did set up, and I'll show this off, is we're back in that step class, so the class that defines how the steps are handled. I did make 2 functions for my convenience. One is just a bool for is the type of step a display type, meaning by default would I have a menu to display and call out to the user. I wanted to have just one singular place that had a list of the types that are display types, so I felt that this was a nice, convenient way to do it.
If you are writing your if statements and you feel that your statements within your if are super long, if this and this and this and this and this, like, not even talking about if statement nesting, just within the top level if this. If that gets super long, try to break it out. Try to figure out, like, okay, these 3 things are true when this, and then shove that into a method, like is display type. Because he could have said, if it's this type or this type or this type, and override and not override no display. So instead of that,
you saw my original version then. No.
No, I didn't, and I think that's fair. I'm sure that expanded as time went on until it was like, this is unwieldy. And I think that's an important step of this process too, is like, it's not a failure on your part to have those things like that. It's a win of your code review process to say, hey, can't you clean that up? Can't you make that one method that I can use all over the place and I know what it means? I did a good job not talking about Salesforce in a Unity code review this whole time. I like to pat myself on the back.
Busted.
For that, but...
I'll play like a police siren sound here.
Yes. So when people ask me like, oh, Salesforce is like, are you even coding? Like, you're just like adding, doing a bunch of configuration and stuff, right? Not the case, and there's a whole, I won't even get into that. But what I do tell people is, as a developer, 90% of my work, and this is not just Salesforce, it's any kind of established platform, 90% of my work is not in setting things up. It's not doing the boilerplate stuff to get, a button on the screen. That's almost instant because I'm using an established platform. What all of my work is, God, I just want this button to do this one extra thing. And it's like, I just don't want that URL to open in a new tab. That's all I want. That's all I'm trying to get it to do, or whatever the thing is. So this thing on line 45 is like, yes, you could put that don't display thing in there. And then it's like, that's an out of the box thing. I call this method and it knows whether it should override or not. But you just set yourself up for heartache later.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, of like, that's kind of the wrestling with Unity as well. Like, and the problem is people are like, you can do anything technically, and like, yes, you can, but how much frustration comes with that anything is completely out of my control. But I've learned, at least with this, is like, and you see it on the forums too, people will describe like, I need a solution that does exactly this. And it's like, okay, do you though? Like, how important is that behavior or feature to your end product? Because a lot of the things for me is like, okay, I've got this working, it looks good, it's not exactly what I wanted, but like, to get exactly what I wanted would be designing it from scratch myself, or a lot of extra code and processing that is now something I have to maintain and is error prone and things like that. And it's like, sometimes it's just better to be happy with what the out of the box can make. And that's a really hard thing to do sometimes. Okay, so to wrap it up, the last thing I kind of want to highlight is there's a couple of things I still... there's 2 things that I want to highlight. One is, it kind of looks like in the pull request I didn't completely accomplish my goal, but I can justify it. And one is an area that I still am going to do more work on, but there's a reason I haven't done it yet. So, the scenario manager, the thing that we started with, and where I moved a lot of the logic out. If we take a look, it's still going to have, after I remove these comments, it's still going to have a handful of things that it processes. And you might be like, Addison, I thought you didn't like this switch statement and was the whole reason you did this refactoring. Well, I said I didn't like the scenario manager processing or handling things that were unrelated to what the scenario manager has really flourished into, which is, you know, all of the loading scenario and setting up and spawning in the things that are part of the loading process. And some of those things also have steps related to them. So, for example, I can have a certain choice you make queue up a future matter. Well, that's directly related to what the scenario manager is handling, is tracking what the future matters are and loading those files at the appropriate time. So this is the right place to handle that processing. These are like here because it's the right home for them. So I haven't removed this switch case. It's just a much cleaner and appropriate switch case. Which I know we have a sub-theme of simping for switch cases on this channel now. So, one thing that is missing, though, that was present in the original iteration is I no longer have a default statement anywhere. So previously, what I had, and actually we can probably see this easiest in the compare now that I deleted all that stuff, is I used to have a beautiful default statement where if I was processing a step and this switch case statement didn't have a case for that type, I would have a very straightforward message for myself saying, hey, this is not a supported action type. It was a good way for me to be like, oh, I missed a step in setting up this new step type. Well, that doesn't exist anymore because there's no single spot where I check. All of them are like scattered across. Like that weather manager, for instance. It's only a part of the puzzle. If you're the right type, then I do things. Else, well, it's not going to throw an exception because some other code's going to handle that else, basically. So, that's missing. Since it was kind of really only there to prevent me from being a bad dev, it's not the end of the world. But I am thinking about ways like, could I have maybe a callback method so that when I call process step, somebody that processes
one more time.
Processes the delegate successfully. Got it.
Nailed it.
It has a callback method that it would do to set like process to true or some flag to say somebody processed it, so that I could have like maybe an exception in here to say, hey, we called all the delegates and nobody processed it. That might be helpful for me as a dev tool, but it might be something that I wouldn't want in the end build of the game because I don't want to throw exceptions. Maybe it would be just like a log file or something, but so that's missing in this approach. It's not the end of the world though for me. The other thing that, this is the one that needs specifically more work, is the display step stuff. So this doesn't follow the same pattern. This is just a case statement, and the main flaw with it right now is that idea of being able to override certain step types to not show a display. It doesn't work right now because the code for processing the stat change is buried in as part of the displaying the menu. So I need to decouple these things. And I'll use that same pattern. I'll basically have like, hey, am I displaying something? Great. Call the UI code, or probably do it the other way around actually. Call the processing code, and then based on how it processed, display the UI, call the UI code to display things to the user. That way, if I'm not going to display things, I don't have to do part 2. I can just do part 1. The reason I haven't done that yet is these step types, stat change, assign new, and reassign, all need to be reinvented to handle non-player houses. So I know, Andrew, you and I have talked about this before. I think it didn't make it into a video, though, where I need to be able to change stats and reassign meeples and things for houses that aren't the player, but all of the code right now is just assuming we're talking about the player. Why rewrite this stuff if I don't know what this code's gonna look like? Like, how is reassigning meeples gonna get handled in the future? So didn't want to do work and then have to redo the work because everything changed. Well, there we go. That's code review for My Liege. This is a shit closing. Oh god!
I'll run it again.
I built it up too much.
What did you say?
I don't even know, but I built it up in my head if I need to have a snappy closing. I do not. I never close my videos snappily, and most people don't even get here. That's the closing. Okay, well, thank you for listening. This has been a code review for My Liege. If you made it this far, hats off to you. I'm impressed. And hello, Mitchell. Because you're probably one of the main ones to make it this far. But anything you want to add as a closing thought, Andrew?
Nope. Thanks for the tour. Definitely want to keep doing these.
Oh, yeah.
It's very fun to see all the things that Unity and C# can do, because I want to do similar things, and you have, from my perspective, forged a path. Not that you're forging new paths and how to do things in Unity, but
I'm the first one to have done any of this.
Yep, you created delegates, right?
Yeah, these
just as soon as you can figure out how they're different from events.
That's the biggest secret. They're not. No, they are. Full disclosure, they are, but my delegates aren't. But no, excellent. I like it. Yeah, and we'll definitely come up with some future topics, I think. But I think we can wrap it up here. Thank you.